Recording in progress.
If the chairperson can just give us about a minute or so, we shall be ready, Chair. We will indicate as soon as we are ready, Chair.
You can just repeat that again, Advocate.
Chair, I was requesting that the chairperson indulges us for about a minute. We will indicate as soon as we are ready, Chair.
Okay.
Chairperson, thank you very much. We may proceed. The House is in order.
Yes. Thank you very much, Advocate Pindela. In keeping with our tradition, allow me to bow to my right and bow to my left. And having done so, I will now observe a moment of silence for prayer or meditation. Thank you very much. And just to remind all delegates, honorable members, that the rules apply to all. Just to remind you, therefore, of the following: that the virtual sitting constitutes the sitting of the National Council of Provinces, that the place of the sitting is deemed to be Cape Town, where the seat of the National Council of Provinces is, that delegates in the virtual sitting enjoy the same powers and privileges that apply in the sitting of the National Council of Provinces, that for the purpose of the quorum, all delegates who are logged onto the virtual platform shall be considered present, that delegates must always switch on their videos, that delegates should ensure that the microphones on minutes are muted and must always remain muted, and that the interpretation facility is active function. And as I've always said, the raise your hand icon is something really that members are familiar with by now. Thank you very much. I've been informed that there will be no notice or motions without notice, except the motions on the order paper in the name of the Chief Whip. So I'll now take this opportunity to call upon the Chief Whip to move the first motion on the order paper. Chief Whip.
Thank you, Chairperson. I move that the Council, notwithstanding provisions of Rule 31, subsection 1 of Rules of National Council of Provinces, grant Honorable B.T. Matevula leave of absence from proceeding of both the Council and committees for the stated period. I so move. Thank you, Chair.
We will now proceed with the motion, and I shall put the question. The question is that the motion be agreed to. Before voting, I shall allow provinces the opportunity to make their declaration of vote in terms of Rule 71, if they so wish. And just to remind members that there's a maximum of 3 minutes per declaration. Can we have an indication?
No declaration, Chair.
Declarations. If they're not declaration, I now call upon the provinces to cast their votes, and we'll call upon to indicate whether they vote in favor, against, or abstain. We'll do so in alphabetical order. We'll start with the Eastern Cape. Eastern Cape?
Eastern Cape in favor, Chair.
Eastern Cape in favor. The Free State?
The state votes in favor, Honorable Chairperson.
Okay, vote in favor. Gauteng?
Gauteng in favor, Honorable Chairperson.
Gauteng in favor. KwaZulu Natal?
KwaZulu Natal iyaseka sihlalo.
Thank you very much. Limpopo?
Chairperson, Limpopo supports it.
Limpopo supports. Mpumalanga?
Mpumalanga support.
Mpumalanga support. Northern Cape?
Northern Cape support, Honorable Chair.
Northern Cape support. Northwest?
Northwest support, Honorable Chairperson.
Northwest support, thank you very much. Western Cape?
Western Cape support.
Western Cape support, thank you very much. Voting is now closed. The indications are that all the 9 provinces have voted in favor. I therefore declare the motion agreed to in terms of Section 65 of the Constitution. Thank you very much. We will now proceed and call upon the Chief Whip to move the second motion on the order paper.
Honorable Chairperson, I've been requested to take the second motion.
Yes,
Honorable Khai.
Honorable Khai.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson, and greetings to you. The motion is that the Council amend motion regarding the election of members of Southern African Development Community Parliamentary Forum, adopted by the Council on the 9th July 2019 in accordance with Article 6, subsection 3 of the Constitution of the Forum, by replacing Mr. Chitegereke Baldwin Matibe from the Limpopo Province ANC with Mr. Seiso Joel Mohai from ANC Free State. I so move, Honorable Chairperson.
We'll now proceed to putting the question, and the question is that the motion be agreed to. But before we proceed, I shall allow provinces an opportunity to make their declarations of the vote in terms of Rule 71, if they so wish. Again, just to remind members that there's a maximum of 3 minutes allocated for declaration. Any declaration? Now that there's no declaration, we shall now call upon provinces to cast their votes, and when called upon, heads of delegations must indicate whether they vote in favor, against, or abstain. And we shall do so again in alphabetical order. We'll start with the Eastern Cape. Eastern Cape.
Eastern Cape iyayichasa.
Eastern Cape iyayichasa. Thank you very much. Free State.
Free State votes in favor.
Free State vote in favor. Gauteng.
Gauteng in favor, Chairperson.
Gauteng vote in favor. KwaZulu-Natal.
KwaZulu-Natal iyaseka sihlalo ngiyabonga.
KwaZulu-Natal iyaseka. Thank you very much. Limpopo.
Limpopo iyayithekga modulasetulo.
Limpopo iyaseka. Thank you very much. Mpumalanga.
Mpumalanga supports.
Mpumalanga supports. Thank you very much. Northern Cape.
Northern Cape supports, Honorable Chair.
Northern Cape supports. Thank you very much. Northwest.
Northwest support, Honorable Chair.
Northwest support. Western Cape.
Western Cape supports.
Western Cape support. Thank you very much. Now that voting has been done and closed, we will now indicate the voting and how it has proceeded. So 9 provinces voted in favor. We will now proceed to the order of the day. Before I proceed to the order of the day, I wish to welcome the Minister in the Presidency for Women, Youth, Culture, Land Reform and Rural Development, MECs, and all special delegates to the shall now proceed to the order. I call on the Honorable Njadu, members to present the committee report.
Chairperson.
Njadu? Yes.
Yes, Honorable Chairperson. Good afternoon.
Please proceed.
Chairperson of Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces and the Deputy, Honorable Chief Whip Mohai, Honorable Finance Minister and Deputy, Honorable MECs and ministers, members, delegates. The National Council of Provinces report of the Select Committee on Finance on the 22nd to 2022 fiscal and revenue proposal date, 8 March 2022. The Minister of Finance
Yes, Honorable Njadu, just take your time. Speak a bit louder, a bit slower.
One of the money bills amendment
and speak
procedure
to the mic.
Okay. Yes, Chairperson, and MMFA and Section 7 of the money bills amendment procedure and related matters. Act number 9 of 2009 Money Bills Act. The Minister, together with the Director General DG senior officials from the National Treasury, briefed the Committee on Finance on the 24th of February 2022. The committee received post-budget tabling input from the Parliamentary Budget Office, PBO, and the Financial and Fiscal Commission, FFC, on the 1st of March 2022. The committee held public hearings on the 2nd of March 2022 and received a total of 11 written and oral submissions from the Congress of South African Trade Unions, COSATU, Fiscal Cliff Study Group, South African Institute of Chartered Accountants, the South African Institute of Tax Professionals, PricewaterhouseCoopers, the Healthy Living Alliance, South African Breweries, Institute for Economic Justice, One Road Consulting, Amandla Mobi, and Women's on Farms Project. And the South African Revenue Service, SARS, responded to the issues raised during the public hearings and engaged with the committee and the stakeholders on the 4th of March, together with National Treasury.
Yeah, there seems to be a bit of a problem there, Honorable Njadu, with your system, but please keep on trying. Again, as I've said before, speak a bit slower, a bit louder, and speak to the mic.
Must switch off the video.
Please proceed. Please proceed.
Chairperson?
Switch off your video, but.
But I switch off the video.
Yeah.
Okay. The minister acknowledged that the country has been operating under difficult times, but the higher than expected revenue provides some space to address some of the spending challenges. But 180 billion revenue over collection assisted the government in responding to the unrest that occurred at KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng provinces in July 2021, and adding 7 billion to support SASRIA, the state-owned insurer. The minister acknowledges that the additional revenue was not a silver bullet for South Africa's financial position, as much of it had already been allocated to critical spending programs before the 2022 budget was tabled. It was also reported that the 2022 budget strengthens the fight against crime with the additional allocation of 8.7 billion to the police, 1.1 billion to the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, 32 billion to National Student Financial Aid Scheme, NSFAS, while the Office of the Chief Justice received an additional 39 billion. The Presidential Youth Employment Programs also received a boost. The minister indicated that despite all that, the budget reduces the fiscal deficit as a crucial part of the debt management strategy, and that the government continues to ensure the health of public finances. He said that the budget provides some relief to taxpayers, both households and companies. Chairperson, important to mention some highlights from the stakeholders. The PPO recommendations from stakeholders. The PPO recommends that economic recovery and restructuring has to be inclusive. Also, a new economic growth should be built on increasing the well-being and buying power of the poor majority, as that will enhance the ability of millions of unemployed South Africans to effectively contribute to the economic future of the country. The IEJ commends that more than revenue windfall should be allocated towards supporting economic recovery. The FFC recommends that the infrastructure fund should operate within the confines of the intergovernmental fiscal relations principle in respect of the equitable distribution of projects and being assigned to a vote. The Commission further recommends that the budget process for 2023-24 should focus on aligning the allocations to the ERRP informed by the comprehensive budget and expenditure review. COSATU recommends employment that it should be rather be expanded so that it can create at least 1 million jobs, like all-time high unemployment, 46% rising. About 22.2 million workers have lost their jobs since the COVID-19 pandemic. With regards to attempts to create jobs, the FFC recommends more significant structural reforms focused on artisanal skills to address unemployment in the long run. For the government to realize its key role in job creation and retention, the EIA recommends that the presidential employment program must be scaled up and gaps filled together with a broader public sector job strategy. Chairperson, on the recommendations of the committee, the committee welcomes the 2022 budget and acknowledges that it strikes a difficult balance between growth, the economy, ensuring fiscal sustainability, maintaining expenditure over the medium term, and providing tax to individuals and companies. Acknowledges some progress made in addressing structural change to growth, made in the address structural growth recorded in both the 2022 and the 2022 budget review, but urges for speedy and practical implementation of economic reforms that will advance economic report progress made every quarter on structural reforms, including while recognizing that more work still needs to be done at the start. The committee acknowledges and commends the progress made in rebuilding SARS in the past few years. The committee further recognizes that the past few years need more resources and suggests that the Select Committee on Appropriations consider recommending the SARS budget should be increased to enable it to efficiently collect revenue and deliver on its mandate. Further, Chairperson, while the wage bill has an impact on the fiscal framework, this matter is better placed with the Appropriations Committee for further consideration. The committee recommends that the government should continue to negotiate with the trade unions to seek comprises on the wage bill and develop a specific short to medium-term plan to address this. The committee reiterates its position that the presidency needs to encourage members of the executive to buy cars that are assembled in South Africa. The committee will pursue this further with the Minister of Finance and the presidency. The committee recognizes that not all models of particular brand of the cars assembled in South Africa here, and that there are other related challenges. However, without being prescriptive, the executive should be encouraged to, as far as possible, buy cars assembled in the country. Public representatives generally and others who serve in the public service should also be encouraged to do this. The committee will raise this with the Portfolio Committee on Trade and Industry and Competition to also take this matter forward as part of the Buy Local campaign. Chairperson, on other budget-related matters, the committee reiterates its recommendation on zero-based budgeting carried out in the July 2020 Special Adjustment Budget Fiscal Framework report. The committee requires to be briefed on the implications of zero-based budgeting. The committee requires the Minister and National Treasurer to do this briefing at the next quarterly meeting. Lastly, Chairperson further recommends that the public procurement bill should be brought to Parliament. The committee recognizes the need for National Treasury to address legal and other challenges affecting the public procurement bill. Therefore, Chairperson, the report is being tabled before the House and for adoption. Thank you very much.
Malibongwe. Igama lamakhosikazi.
Thank you, Chair.
You are muted, Chair.
Well done, Comrade Njatu.
This one out. Thank you very much. Sorry. So thank you very much, honorable delegates. I now put the question, and the question is that the report be adopted. But before we proceed to voting, I shall now allow provinces the opportunity to make their declarations of vote in terms of Rule 71, if they so wish. Again, as a reminder, maximum 3 minutes per declaration. Any declaration?
Yes, Honorable Chair.
Yes, Labuschagne.
Thank you very much. Honorable Chair, the revised fiscal framework has been well interrogated by the committee, and this report is a good reflection of the discussions with the input received from the public participation or during the public participation process. Some key issues are worth highlighting. The current uncertainty brought about by the imperialist Russian invasion into Ukraine is a matter of grave concern, and while the developments are so recent that they did not form part of the tabled fiscal policy, they were certainly part of their discussions. The entire world is bracing for economic hardships, and we are poorly prepared and still reeling from the COVID-19 pandemic and the economy ravaging lockdowns. At times like this, taxpayers need to know two things. Firstly, that they are being fairly treated, and secondly, that the money they contribute is being well spent. The deliberations of the committee confirmed that there is a way to go before SARS wins back the trust of taxpayers, and systems currently in place are not working optimally when complexities emerge. As for the money being well spent, there is great concern about how the government is directing our resources. The issue of a lack of accountability has been repeatedly raised, and it is high time that there be proper consequences for financial irregularities. Redeployment, promotion of simple avoidance can no longer be tolerated as the tax pool shrinks, more demands are placed on the fiscus, and every cent needs to be spent wisely. Which brings me to the spending of departments. Annual incremental increases can no longer be the norm, where we merely give a department an inflation linked increase to carry on its business. We must be more careful. Every project in every department needs to be reviewed for the value that it adds to South Africa. Where the cost exceeds the value, the project must be shelved. This is a zero based budget. This is zero based budgeting. This is simple economics. This must be done urgently. The fiscal framework is ideologically stagnant and cannot be supported. I thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Honorable Labus Kachner. Are there any other declaration? Any other declaration?
Chairperson, I put up my hand on behalf of KZN.
Yes, please proceed, Eunice Karim.
Thank you, Chairperson. Firstly, I'm not sure what ideologically stagnant means. The DA has never been strong on ideology as far as I know. On policy, yes, but on ideology, no, I don't know that that's valid at all. So basically, it's not clear what the critique is. It's simply like an empty slogan. Anybody can say it about anything, anywhere, anytime. On the matter of taxpayers not getting a fair deal, which is the effect of what she says, Ms. Labuskafni, I don't know how valid that is. What we do know is there were complaints by some of the tax experts, some valid, some not. And we said, okay, instead of us having this at public hearings all the time, why doesn't SARS meet with the relevant stakeholders and settle their differences to the extent they can and report back at the first quarterly briefing that follows from now? Now, overall, SARS is doing an excellent job by any measure. Even the members of the DA admitted in our committee. I'm not sure where Mrs. Labuskachni got some of her statements from. They never emerged, as far as I can remember, in that form in the hearings, which she was not present at, or in the deliberations yesterday. Basically, about winning back trust, I mean, that's a very sweeping statement. The winning back of trust has actually begun to occur under the new regime or new leadership. And it's going to take a long haul. And it's not as if it can happen overnight. If anything, SARS needs to be complimented for the work they've done in the last few years, not least on tackling the illicit economy. But as they themselves say, Chairperson, there's a long way to go. And they do need more resources. In fact, our committee, though it's not our remit, put it to the appropriations committee that they consider, we can't decide for them, an increase in the SARS budget because of the huge tasks they have and staffing and other resource challenges that they do. So they're doing a good job overall. It's a cluster of people who broadly probably share the values of the DA. I don't know, but so it seems to me in some of their positions. And yes, they should be met. They are all much part of the democracy as anybody else is, and that's what we suggested. On the issue of the money being well spent, we agree. That's a responsibility, not just of the executive alone, that's just a responsibility of the whole parliament, which includes Ms. Labuskachni. I mean, she interrupts me, though I don't do her. Well, the next time I will be interrupting her because it's too short a space for me to respond to the absurdities that came out of her speech, and 3 minutes not enough. So the next time, Chairperson, since she's doing this, I shall be intervening while she's speaking and retort at every other sentence. She had opportunity. She gave us an empty series of glib statements. Now she must answer for that. What exactly does she mean by some of these things? That they're not getting fairness and so on. Who says that? It's a cluster of people, technical experts who themselves have very specific constituencies. But as we say, SARS, like any institution, not least our committees, can do far more and should do far more. The bigger issues are that though this is a good budget, as Treasury itself acknowledges, there are too many uncertainties, not least the war in Ukraine, the Ukraine-Russia war at the moment, or the Russia-Ukraine war, whatever your take is on it. That's not the issue so much as the enormous consequences of that war globally, but for our country in particular. There are talks of the petrol price going up to 40 rands per litre. Mr. Fani Jutoy from the Freedom Front raised the effect of fertilizer increases on farmers and so on. And of course, as usual, as always, disproportionately it will be the poor and disadvantaged chairperson, as you well know, and so indeed the most progressives in this parliament, that actually the poor and disadvantaged who will suffer disproportionately, even if all of us will. Those are the bigger issues. Obviously, Treasury couldn't factor in the consequences of the war because when the fiscal framework was shaped, there was no war definitely on the cards. But here it is, we have to live with it, whichever party we come from, and making glib statements isn't going to help. We need concrete answers to these questions, and more importantly, our committee in particular, but Parliament as a whole, we have to be more effective in our oversight. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Karim. Any other declaration? It doesn't seem like there's any. And that being the case, we shall now proceed to the voting on the question. And the question is that the report be adopted. I now call upon the provinces to cast their votes. When called upon, the heads of delegations must indicate whether they are voting in favor, against, or they are abstaining. We'll start again with the Eastern Cape, alphabetical order. Eastern Cape.
Eastern Cape, Yamkela is reported session.
Eastern Cape support. Free State.
Free State votes in favor.
Free State votes in favor. Gauteng.
Gauteng in favor.
Gauteng in favor. KwaZulu Natal.
KwaZulu Natal,
Thank you very much. Limpopo.
Chairperson, Limpopo supports the report.
Support the report. Mpumalanga.
Mpumalanga support the report.
Mpumalanga support the report. Northern Cape.
Northern Cape support the report, Chair.
Cape support the report. Northwest.
Northwest support the report, Honorable Chair.
Northwest support the report. Western Cape.
The Western Cape does not support.
Western Cape does not support the report. Are you voting against? Honorable Labuskachne. Are you voting against? Or are you abstaining?
That's what she said.
It's not what I said. Let us respond.
Honorable members who can't all speak at the same time. Honorable Labuskachne. Anyway, okay. Thank you very much. We'll proceed. The voting is now closed. 8 provinces voted in favor, and Honorable Labuskachne will assume she's voting against, if not abstaining. I therefore declare the report adopted in accordance with Section 65 of the Constitution. Thank you very much. We will now proceed, honorable delegates, to the subject of debate, as printed on the order paper. Debate on 2021 Women's Charter for Accelerated Development with the theme setting a 25-year vision and agenda to advance women's equality, growth, and development. I will now call upon the Honorable S.E. Lucas, Deputy Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, to open the debate. Honorable Lucas.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, House Chairpersons, the Chief Whip of the National Council of Provinces, Ministers and Deputy Ministers present, ladies and gentlemen, permanent delegates as well as special delegates. Allow me, first of all, to take this opportunity to welcome you all to this very important debate on the 2021 Women's Charter for Accelerated Development. This debate takes place just a day after we commemorated International Women's Day, which symbolizes this collective struggle for women's resolve to attain equality across all sectors of society. Let me begin the debate with a few thought-provoking words, one spoken by Mahatma Gandhi when he said, and I quote, "The things that will destroy us are politics without principle, pleasure without conscience, wealth without work, knowledge without character, business without morality, science without humanity, and worship without sacrifice," close quote. These are important considerations in the current context of our society at large, where social and political systems articulate equality, but the hegemony of these democratic and equal rights-based systems are both negated and continually retracted. This is particularly the case in the lived reality of women, whose development is impeded by socio-political and cultural contexts that is devoid of the commitment to bring about effective change in the lives of the women of our country. This is not only the responsibility of the governing systems alone, but also the collective responsibility of society at large, which must move to cultivate a new socio-political, cultural, and economic order, which places women as equal participants across the development spectrum of our country. Today's debate hence marks an important day in the sustained continuum of gender transformation in South Africa. It symbolizes the culmination of a 20-month review process of the 1994 Women's Charter for Effective Equality, which resulted in the adoption of the 2021 Women's Charter for Effective Equality for the realization of tangible women's rights. As we bring together very critical leaders in the continuum of gender equality in today's debate, we seek to activate all three spheres of government to work in concert for gender equality. Through our collective and sustained efforts, we must purposefully create a society where the women of South Africa can attain tangible freedom and tangible equality, as actualized through tangible economic freedom in our lifetime. Honorable Chairperson, the voices of women throughout the review process also affirm that, and I quote, "the eradication of patriarchy needs all forces of society, more so because it coexists and survives under the most progressive political systems. Patriarchy is articulated in many diverse, subtle, hidden, or open and crude forms. It is explained away in many logical sounding ways, ranging from the natural, biological to religious and cultural arguments, because one of its strongest bases is the family, the home, and among loved ones. It is one of the most complex and entrenched systems in our society. It is embedded in and permeates through all spheres of life. Patriarchy and its multiple manifestations requires all forms of struggle and persuasion, robust contestation, compromise, sustained pressure, and unwavering confrontation. We are here today to reassert the Women's Charter as a demand document, an instrument to drive our transformation agenda, to confront the barriers of patriarchy, and to build an equal society where women can attain a better quality of life based on the values of our Constitution. Honorable Chairperson, as I'm going to give a brief background on what transpired during our process. In 2019, at the inaugural Women's Parliament of the 6th Dispensation, a resolution was taken by the women of our country at that session, historically, that Parliament must undertake an extensive review of the 1994 Women's Charter for Effective Equality. This resolution was empowered by the fact that women continue to grapple with the triple challenges of poverty, unemployment, and inequality, which are intensified by poverty, gender-based violence, femicide, and economic exclusion. Statistics also confirm that mostly Black African females in South Africa are negatively affected. The review process was underpinned by the following key pillars: a gender analysis of local government, which included a review of the integrated development planning processes, gender responsive planning and budgeting at local government level, as well as the gendered provision of services at local government level. A gender analysis of provincial government, which included a review of provincial planning processes, the provincial growth and development strategies, as well as gender responsive planning and budgeting across all provincial departments. An in-depth review of the systemic weaknesses in the national gender machinery, national, provincial, and district. An in-depth review of the systemic and institutional arrangements, particularly at provincial and local government level, which weaken or create exclusionary systemic processes, thereby undermining the gender transformation agenda. A review of systemic weaknesses that impede gender responsive planning and budgeting across the three spheres of government in order to ensure that women benefit fairly from the state's financial and other resources. And the review process also included a review of existing legislation and policies through a gender lens in order to identify gaps in our laws and policies so as to address structural constraints which perpetuate poverty and inequality amongst our women. The review process was underpinned by a strong public participation component, enabling women across every district in all 9 provinces in the country to participate in the review process. Through the review process, we also undertook to assess progress that has been made in implementing the provisions of the Women's Charter of 1994 for effective equality. The review process confirmed that both the 1954 and the 1994 Women's Charters, respectively and jointly, represent the culmination of women's active participation in South Africa's liberation movement towards the realization of freedom, democracy, and gender equality. Both the charters articulate a vision for a democratic society and give content to the idea of gender equality as it was envisaged to be achieved in the context of a post-colonial, post-apartheid South Africa. Both charters further represent critical building blocks in our struggle history, further signifying women's commitment to challenge the status quo in an unequal society and subsequently constructing to a body of socio-economic, civic, and political rights based on these strategic manuscripts to advance gender equality. Over the years, concerns has mounted at the enormous gap between the Charter's commitments and the indicators of women's continued embattled social standing on the other hand. The gap between policy and practice is glaring. The review process has uncovered a number of salient issues which affect all aspects of women's life, including the following. Despite the plethora of policy and legislative instruments enacted since the advent of democracy in 1994, women in South Africa still continue to bear the brunt of high level of inequality, economic exclusion, unemployment, gender-based violence, and femicide. Various indicators are linked to the persistence of the multiple vulnerabilities of South African women. Importantly, female-headed households continue to be the poorest of the poor, with unemployment and not in education or training rates being particularly high amongst female youth. Government's existing gender planning and budgeting mechanisms are often fragmented and lack coherence, broad-based political support, and are non-binding. Out of 9 provincial machinery structures in South Africa, only 7 are still located as per the provision of the National Gender Policy Framework of 2000. No province was found to have an articulated theory of change embedded on women empowerment principles and gender equality prescripts. There is lack of mechanisms to institutionalize gender through the provincial growth and development strategies of provinces. Currently, there is no province with which its PGD is underpinned by gender responsive planning, budgeting, monitoring, and evaluation, as well as gender auditing. If we speak about the participation of women in the economy, The review process has found that women are at the receiving end of a continued onslaught of socio-political and economic oppression because they continue to be deprived of their indivisible human rights. Gender inequality and patriarchy poses major constraints to the development of our democratic societies, particularly when women are not able to fully participate in the economic structures of society. Warren Samuels shares key perspectives from his book, The Legal Economic Nexus, Fundamental Processes, where he postulates the interrelated issues of law, economy, and policy. These issues are of particular importance as we seek to reposition our economy in the unfolding and fluid context of the COVID-19 pandemic, which many argue has had a regressive impact on women's quality of life. We must therefore interrogate how law, economy, and policy function cooperatively in order to leverage these interrelations to accelerate the implementation of key priorities that pertain to gender equality. And he states the following in his book, and I quote, "In social reconstruction, the fundamental policy question always is whose interests are to count, and it contains inevitable distributional or structural problems. Even if one were to affirm that individual preferences count, the fundamental policy question remains whose interests are or preferences are to count. The legal economic nexus is the complex social process through which answers to these questions are reworked and in which thereby the social reconstruction of reality is effectuated," close quote. Samuels positions the concept of reconstruction within the legal economic nexus for purposes of addressing distributional and structural changes. The South African historical context frames the necessity for wealth redistribution, which is located in the macroeconomic strategy and development objectives of this country. In this context, the needs and preferences of the poorest, particularly Black African women, remain central, as guided by the imperative to bring about transformation through the appropriate reconstruction projects. A study conducted by the World Bank, and this thing I'm repeating because I've been repeating it for many times, by the World Bank postulates the view that gender progress benefits everyone, not just women and girls. When economies thrive, women, men, girls, and boys have equal access to opportunities, and more so, communities prosper when women and men are equally empowered. Most importantly, disparities in gender equality come with economic costs. They shortchange the next generation and lead to suboptimal institutions and policies. That World Bank study has also found that globally, women account for only 38% of human capital wealth versus the 62% for men. In low and low middle income countries, women account for a third or less of human capital wealth. On a per capita basis, gender inequality in earnings could lead to losses in wealth of $23,620 per person globally. These losses differ between regions and countries because levels of human capital wealth and thereby losses in wealth due to gender inequality tend to increase in absolute values with economic development. For these reasons, in absolute terms, the losses are said to be the largest in OECD countries. Globally, for the 141 countries included in the analysis, the loss in human capital wealth due to gender inequality is estimated at $106.2 trillion. If we simply assume that women would earn as much as men, this is about twice the value of the GDP globally. Said differently, human capital wealth could increase by 21.7% globally and total wealth by 14% with gender equality in earnings. Albertine and Goldblatt in their paper, Facing the Challenge of Transformation, require a complete reconstruction of the state and society, including a redistribution of power and resources along egalitarian lines. The challenge of achieving equality within this transformation project involves the eradication of systemic forms of domination and material disadvantage based on race, gender, class, and other grounds of inequality. It also entails the development of opportunities which allow people to realize their full human potential within positive social relationships. Honorable members, for as long as women are prevented from participating fully and effectively in the socio-political and economic sectors of our society, we will continue to function with less than half the capacity required to accelerate human development. Women will continue to remain trapped in abusive and violent relationships, with many resulting in femicide. More so, If economic exclusion persists in our country, the eradication of gender equality and patriarchy requires the participation of all sectors of society. It requires the participation of both men and women to uproot it. The realization of gender equality is not a responsibility that resides with women MPs only. Male MPs have a crucial role to play in the process to deconstruct patriarchy and gender inequality. This also requires the participation of men from all sectors of society, who must play a decisive role in the implementation of the provisions of the 2021 Women's Charter for Accelerated Development. The Women's Charter for Accelerated Development, honorable members, demands that the theory of change be embedded in all facets of the state machinery, so as to ensure that gender equality is effectively materialized. The Charter provides a clearly articulated roadmap to guide our collective mainstreaming approach for the realization of high-level implementation in the pursuit of gender equality. The 2021 Women's Charter also articulates far-reaching policy and legislative matters for urgent prioritization and serves as an instrument for continued efficacy assessment. What is to be done to make the Charter effective? The Charter will require a social compact and a resolute commitment to re-engineer systematic and institutional arrangements across the three spheres of government to enable gender-sensitive good governance policy redesign, planning, budgeting, and implementation processes. Poverty mapping perspectives in gender-responsive planning and budgeting should be institutionalized as an imperative for responsive planning across provinces, districts, metros, and localities. The Auditor General should also include gender performance indicators in the assessment of financial management processes. We need to facilitate for the review of the appointment level of gender focal persons in accordance with the provisions of the National Gender Policy Framework of 2000. There should be intensive capacity building programs on gender mainstreaming for the provincial gender machinery and provincial administration, including local government, so that all key role players may have a common understanding on the importance of gender mainstreaming approaches and their implementation. We already began to activate a structured oversight and accountability program, which will be underpinned by quarterly report back monitoring and evaluation process. I want to conclude, Honorable Chairperson, with this quote from Thomas Paine when he said, and I quote, "The world is my country, all mankind are my brethren, and to do good is my religion," close quote. An argument can be made that if we make good deeds our religion, then the scourge that afflicts women, such as gender-based violence, rape, and economic marginalization, can be eliminated. The progress we make as a society can only have full and deeper meaning if it is accompanied by significant progress in the struggle for the emancipation of women. I believe that we should accept the proposition that we must measure the success of progress towards a social transformation by the advances we make in the struggle for a non-sexist society. Indeed, we must measure the progress towards a democratic transformation by the progress we record in the struggle for gender equality. The ideology of patriarchy has surpassed the ideological construct of racism. We need to address the issues as two different constructs. We need to decolonize our thinking, deconstruct the idea of patriarchy, and begin to reconstruct a new way of thinking about gender equality as a norm. In other words, we need to move for a total paradigm shift in our thinking, our practices, and our perspectives. The struggle against patriarchy is therefore a struggle within the struggle, and it cannot be forged by women alone. All of us have to bring our forces together, both men and women. The 2021 Women's Charter for Accelerated Development is a clarion call for accelerated action. It is a demand for effective equality in our lifetime. Forward to the 2021 Women's Charter for Accelerated Development. Forward. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. We will now proceed to Honorable B. Fanta. Honorable Fanta.
Person. Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson. Honorable Chairperson of the NSOP, the honorable members of Parliament of NSOP, ministers and deputy ministers present in this august house, delegates from provinces, distinguished guests, I greet you all in the name of Jesus. Honorable Chairperson, it is my pleasure to take part in the debate, which is at the core of our struggle for a prosperous, non-sexist, and non-racial democratic South Africa. I feel humbled and honored to debate in celebrating International Women's Day. Being a member of the Eastern Cape Legislature, the ANC Women's League Chairperson, and the Chairperson of the Multi-Party Women's Caucus in the legislature. Honorable Chairperson, the International Women's Day first emerged from activities of labor movements at the turn of 20th centuries across North America and Europe. The commemoration of International Women's Day is a global history in honoring the achievements of women and promoting women's rights, irrespective of race and dignity. Across the world, in the rich and poor countries, alike women are being beaten, trafficked, raped, killed, and slaughtered like sheep. The women are oppressed by capital, patriarchy, enduring race patterns of economic activity, COVID-19 and growing levels of inequality and global dynamics enhanced by war. South African government of the apartheid system threatened to reintroduce past laws for women, as these had been relaxed after success of earlier resistance and fought against passes for our women of 1956. The national struggles of women in different countries have culminated in a global united effort to oppose and eradicate subjugation of women in all tiers of society. The global effort has mainly been responsible for progress made by humanity in the fight against oppression of women. Chairperson, Honorable Chairperson, the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa promotes equality, which states that everyone is equal before the law and has the right to equal protection and benefit of the law. Equality includes the full equal enjoyment of all rights and freedoms. To promote the achievement of equality, legislative and other forms of measures designed to promote or advance persons, categories of persons disadvantaged by unfair discrimination may be taken. Honorable Chairperson, women participate in large numbers and in sectors of economy which are characterized by low wages and poor working conditions. Low remuneration is worsened by discrimination against women in the receipt of social benefits. Numerous international and regional instruments have drawn attention to gender-related dimensions of human rights issues, the most important being the UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women, adopted in 1979. It has been stated in the International Bill of Rights of Women that despite some progress in women's wages in the 1990s, women still earn less than men, even for similar kind of work. As a global women, we need to eliminate such discrimination of women by accelerating development of women in all tiers, international and local. Honorable Chairperson, the President of South Africa, Comrade Cyril Ramaphosa, in his address of the 110th birthday celebration, mentioned that over the years, women's organizations have been at the forefront of the struggle to assert the rights and improve the status of women within our democratic formation and the broader society. Our president also mentioned the ANC must support the Women's League to act as the voice not only of women members of ANC, but of the mass of South African women, including young women, in a broad front of gender transformation and societal change. Accessible and appropriate institutions to be established to enable accessible quality education, thereby enabling active participation of women in all forms of platform and sectors of society, rural women, single mothers, and disabled women. Honorable Chairperson, we are proud as Eastern Cape, as our premier, who is the rightful person to appoint HODs. 7 out of 10 HODs in our department, in our province, are women. That for us, it is a plus, and we highly appreciate what our Premier has done to make sure that women are taking strategic position in the government led by ANC. Siyabulela kakhulu. Futhi we are looking forward that in all levels of our government, women are in the strategic position. For the first time in this Cape legislature, we have a secretary who is a woman. We have chief financial officers in the legislature. We have provincial commissioner who is a woman. That is highly appreciated because kuyabonakala ukuthi isakhono samakhosikazi siyabonwa. Sibulela kakhulu ke even up to our president who assented the Gender-Based Violence and Criminal Procedure Act Amendment Bill. Yanga ihlabathi lingakopa kwezi zinto uhulumende wethu azenzayo ukuba amakhosikazi akhuseleleke eMzantsi Afrika naselizweni lonke. I cannot go down, I can't even mention the issue of gender-based violence that our president has declared a pandemic. We are worried as women are still in the 2022, are still dying like flies. And see, City, support that international women's rights, that must be treated as human rights. Amakhosikazi mawakhuselwe in all spheres of our government. We have clear programs to fight this cause of gender-based violence. The gender machinery that are there, they must work hard to make sure that there are programs. The issue of a boy child in South Africa is a problem. We need members of parliament. We need faith-based organization. We need all the people to make sure that we are dealing with a boy child, because by the look of things, they are the most perpetrators of killing women. I thank you, Chairperson. I support and wishing everyone a happy International Month and International Women's Day. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Fanta. We'll move on to Honorable D. Christian. Honorable Christians.
Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you.
Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Minister, Honorable members, and fellow South Africans, good afternoon. The Women's Charter was first developed in 1954 in order to provide a more equal society for women in South Africa. The review of the Charter in 2021 emphasized the extent of poverty and inequality against women and the importance of advancing gender equality in our country. The Women's Charter remains one of the country's most important instruments to achieve this, as it provides a roadmap of the role of government and its partnership with civil society that outlines the next steps to ensure equality between genders. It provides a blueprint to government to accelerate the development of women in order to construct gender-sensitive policies and legislative instruments. The implementation of these policies and instruments across national, provincial, and local governments is therefore of paramount importance. Statistics South Africa reported in 2020 that South Africa had a population of 59.62 million, of which 51.1% are women and 48.9% male. The latest overall expanded unemployment rate in the country is currently 46.6%, with 51% of women being unemployed. Black African women being the most vulnerable, with an unemployment rate far exceeding other women. The proportion of women employed in the unprotected informal sector of the economy is 75% higher than men. Women spend 2.5 times more in unpaid care and domestic work than men. In both quarter 1 of 2019 and quarter 2 of 2020, more than 4 in every 10 young females were not in employment, education, or training. Female-headed households are experiencing much greater levels of poverty than male-headed households, and so much more, especially in our rural provinces. At the moment, it is estimated that 30 million South Africans are living below the poverty line, with women, once again, much more affected by poverty than men. Women and girls in South Africa still face many challenges, including gender-based violence, child marriages, and teenage pregnancies. This despite the abundance of policy and legislative instruments passed since the advent of democracy in 1994. Women in South Africa still continue to bear the brunt of high levels of inequality, economic exclusion, unemployment, gender-based violence, as well as femicide. We have to acknowledge the disturbing realities and countless obstacles hindering the advancement of women in our country, and it is no secret that the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated it. There should be accelerated urgency in scrutinizing the targets of departments and administrators in this regard, and hold those assigned to advanced women's rights accountable. Performance targets have to be met, and adequate budgets need to be pledged to reflect this commitment in order to bring about real transformation and ensure equality. The review of the Women's Charter has exposed the obvious gap between policy and implementation, and the disconnect between public endorsement of gender equality and actual institutional practice. This disparate share of poverty, inequality, and unemployment held by South African women is further intensified by the persistent levels of gender-based violence and femicide. The Women's Charter sets 15 strategic objectives to advance women's rights in order to break down barriers that hold women back from participating in our democratic society. However, these objectives are merely declaration of advocacy, but not backed by action, leadership, or funding. The Charter emphasizes this disparity in its opening remarks, where it states that the triple challenges of poverty, inequality, and unemployment, including the pervasive levels of gender-based violence and femicide, represent the amalgamated and most persistent challenges faced by women. It further emphasizes in the Charter that the feminization of poverty is significant because poverty is experienced differently by women as compared to men, more so due to the economic, political, and social dynamics prevalent in our country. Overcoming this deeply entrenched poverty, unemployment, and underdevelopment will therefore require concerted and persistent efforts from all sectors of our society. Women shoulder the responsibility of raising children, with more than 42% of women heading households and seeing to the well-being of extended family members. The Women's Charter must be interrogated and articulated into tangible, practical, and measurable objectives, which in turn must reflect in all our departments across the country. We must ensure adequate investment in women in terms of quality childcare, education, skills development, access to quality healthcare, justice, housing and infrastructure, entrepreneurship, access to good quality jobs, security, and of course, ending patriarchy, to mention but a few dilemmas facing the women in this country. In South Africa, we cannot speak about gender equality and women's rights without condemning the scourge of gender-based violence and femicide in the country. Between 2015 and 2020, 13,815 women over the age of 18 were murdered. That's close to 7 women a day. And sadly, we remember these women who have lost their lives. We need to intensify our efforts to protect women and act harshly on men who commit these murders to ensure that women and girl children are not left vulnerable to the whims of men. The Charter speaks extensively on the eradication of all forms of violence against women and children. However, without adequate support from government departments as well as implementation of policies, we will not win this war. Equality for women should be categorized as a basic human right, and government should make it a priority to implement the policies as set out by the Women's Charter in order to remove all social and economic barriers. Empowering and investing in women is critical in the development of South Africa, as it will ensure economic prosperity for all in the country. We applaud the women who have worked diligently on the development and further reviews of the Women's Charter in order to build a dignified nation where girls and women are advanced, respected, and protected. Over the years, these women have worked tirelessly to remove the barriers and build a dignified nation, which includes women, and continue endeavors to overcome the obstacles facing women. We support and commit ourselves to the realization of the Women's Charter in order to advance women's equality, growth, and development. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Christian. We'll then move on to Honorable Lutuli. Honorable Lutuli.
Ngibonge sihlalo ngibingelele. When the first Women's Charter was developed in 1954, iNingizimu Afrika yayikwesinye isigaba ngokwezepolitiki. Kwathi uma isigaba sesibili se-Women's Charter sesithula ngo-1994, izinkulungwane zabantu besifazane babuyelwa yithemba elikhulu. Iningi labantu besifazane baseNingizimu Afrika baba nelikhulu ithemba becabanga ukuthi yonke le mithetho eyayibekiwe ukucindezela nokulwa nelungelo lomuntu wesifazane ngaphambili ka-1994 yayisishabalala. Kepha kuze kube yinamhlanje singabantu besifazane asikakhululeki, sisazibona sicindezelekile futhi singalingani. The ushering in of the new constitutional era meant that women, Black women in particular, were finally acknowledged as full citizens of South Africa. Kepha sihlalo, ngaphansi kweqembu elibusayo, abantu besifazane abakabi sezingeni lokulingana nokukhuliswa. Sizibona siqhubeka nokucindezeleka nokungabonwa ngeso lenkululeko njengasekuqaleni. Abantu besifazane sihlalo lapha eNingizimu Afrika basenezingqinamba eziningi. As women, we continue fighting for what should be basic human rights, because women's rights are human rights. And while challenges facing our development have evolved over time, the key element of the problem hampering women's development remain essentially the same. Kunegebe elikhulu elisaqhubeka mekuziwa kubantu besifazane lapha eNingizimu Afrika nakwezemiholo ukusishiya kunesithombe singacacile kahle kulelizwe. Udlame olubhekiswe kubantu besifazane lusadlala indima enkulu yize sesaba namalungelo abantu ashicilelwe. Violence filters into the lives of all women. As women, we are impacted not only by violence itself, but also by the constant threats of violence and the extraordinary length which we have to go through to avoid it, including how we have to go through to avoid it, including how we present ourselves in public, how we dress, speak, and with whom we associate. South Africa also remains the rape capital of the world. We need no convincing of this, as our latest quarterly crime statistic reported that 11,315 people were raped in the country between the period of October and December 2021. Hlalo, the labor market remains more favorable to men than women. Women in South Africa and around the world still face a number of challenges that hinders them from accessing employment, and men are still more likely to be in a paid employment than women, regardless of race, while women are more likely than men to be doing unpaid work. Imizi engaphezulu ka-42% lapha eNingizimu Afrika hlalo iphethwe ngabantu besifazane. Lokho nje kusho ukuthi abantu besifazane bathwele ukukhulisa abantwana baphinde babhekelele inhlalakahle yemindeni yabo. Izinga lokungabi khona kwemisebenzi kubantu besifazane kungaphezulu kunalokho okubhekene nabantu besilisa. Abantu besifazane abangasebenzi balinganiselwa phakathi kuka-90% kanye no-30% kunabantu besilisa. Women are at the coalface of poverty. They suffer the most from crime, scorn the most in public institution, and almost always get the short end of the sticks when it comes to access to justice. And are also the ones who do not get paid equal for equal work. All access the world, women continue to face a number of obstacles in leadership position, as we still live in a world where, regardless of race, class, or sex, women are still considered as outsiders, whose lives experience are minimally recognized, as women are still confined to domestic roles. These are the structural challenges which are today the realization of the objectives set out for in the Women's Charter. If we are to ever unleash the full potential of women's development, we must be able to address these challenges, Chairperson. We need to be in a position to convert these ideals and we need to be in a position to convert these ideals and encapsulate them in a charter into concrete, workable, and measurable objectives for each of the government departments. In doing so, growth and the development of gender equality relies on ending discrimination towards women and providing equal access to education and opportunities for employment. Amaphoyisa kumele abe nendlela esezingeni eliphezulu lokuphatha amacala okunyukubeza kwabantu besifazane. Akwamukeleki futhi akugculisi ukwazi ukuthi amacala amaningi akalitholi ithuba lokungena enkantolo ngenxa yokungabi nesineke sokuphenya nokuthi akunabufakazi okwanele bokuthula ezinkantolo. The justice system in its entirety must be the one that is sensitized to the system and nature of women oppression. Abantu besifazane kumele hlalo babelwe umhlaba, kumele basekwe uma befuna ukuqala ezamabhizinisi, badinga imisebenzi ngaphandle kokuthi baphoqwe ukuthi balalwe ukuze bathole le misebenzi. True equality and development lies in the basic and fundamental ideals, and these are not possible when we still have a state which primarily serves the interest of capital, such as the state we have today. Okubalulekile ukudlula konke ukuthi this charter angeke isiyise ndawo uma singazimiseli ukuphindaphinda sikuphindelise kaningi our efforts to ensure that women obtain economic freedom in our lifetime. As economic freedom fighters, we are for the full development of women. We are and have always been ready for women leadership. We are for the elimination of all forms of discrimination that are mainly pointed at our women. Those ideals we will fight for until the end of time. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Luchuli. The next speaker is going to be Honorable A.D. Malika. Honorable Malika.
The Chief Whip, Minister, Deputy Minister, Permanent and Special Delegates, good afternoon. Honorable Chairperson and members, inaugural Women's Charter of 1954, where the women of our country organized under the banner of the Federation of South African Women made a clarion call for a non-sexist society based on the principles of democracy, freedom, and liberty, and impartially significantly changed the trajectory of the struggle against apartheid colonialism. The coherent proposals made by the women activists in the charter will go on to find expression in the charter, in the Freedom Charter, the following year in 1955. As we all know, the Freedom Charter became the lodestar for the forces of liberation and continues to guide the democratic state. The charter was significant in the sense that it placed at the center stage the gender question. This was at the height of apartheid racial and class system of exploitation, and highlighted the point that even at the time, women bear the brunt of the exploitation and marginalization. Drawing from their experience with the colonial system and oppression, the women's movement put across concrete demands to the regime. Amongst them are the following: the right to vote and to be elected to all state bodies without restricted and discrimination, the right to full opportunities for employment with equal pay and possibilities of promotion in all spheres of work, equal rights with men in relation with property, marriage, and children, and for the removal of all laws and customs that deny women such equal rights, for the removal of all laws that restrict free movement, that prevent or hinder the right of free association and activity in democratic organizations, and the right of participate in the work of these organizations. Chairperson, there is no doubt that as a liberation movement and as a country, we have come to a long way in advancing these objectives since the Charter was adopted in 1954 and the democratization of our country since 1994. Honorable Chairperson, women have always been the motive forces of change in the struggle against colonialism. This is because the system of colonial apartheid oppression was more brutal to women than any strata in society. While women suffered from patriarchy in pre-colonial society in Africa under the communal and feudal system, however, the process of colonialism and class exploitation relegated them to non-entities with no political, social, and economic rights. This is traceable from the promulgation of the Glen Grey Act of 1894 by the Cape Colonial Government. This act established a system of individual land ownership and introduced a labor tax forcing men to employment in commercial farms. The Glen Grey Act was promulgated at the time when land was the only means of production and survival dependent on access. The impact that was because tax was imposed on men, it meant women were denied the right to work as they were not regarded as tax-paying citizens. Prior to the Glen Grey Act, land was regarded as a collective property of African community, and women enjoy access and participated in the agricultural economy. The process of colonialism not only ushered a system of exploitation which excluded women from economic activity and created income inequalities skewed in favor of men, but it also transformed patriarchal relations in African by ushering in new cultural practices which are characterized by the commodification women as the property. It is common cause that apartheid colonialism existed to protect and preserve the system of capitalist accumulation. It promulgated passed laws to regulate the movement of Africans in the cities who were meant to provide cheap labor in the mines and surrounding industries. Women could not exist in certain spaces without having a husband who can vouch for them, and unless they were carrying a permit. The women's movement was the first amongst oppressed groups to protest the past laws. in as early as 1919, the Bantu Women's League, under the first president of Dr. Cholo Matreke, undertook the passive resistance against the application of past laws to women by mobilizing 5,000 African and colored women to sign a petition. In 1930, addressing the conference in European and Bantu Christian Student Organization, Mama Dr. Charlotte Matreke captured conditions which define the existence of women in the cities under the past laws, where she said, in these circumstances, obtain the husband and wife, live together in the towns. Imagine the case of the woman whose husband has gone to town and left her, forgetting apparently all his responsibilities. Here we get young women, the flower of the young of the Bantu, going up in towns in search of their husbands. And as I have already stated, living in the reputed wives of other men because of the location requirements, or becoming housekeepers to men in their location and towns, and eventually their nominal wives. We can deduce from this that the process of apartheid colonialism thrust upon African women a situation which the very little choice they had to work as sex workers. This is as such as a reality today as it was back in those days. We need to pay attention to the plight of sex workers and the conditions of faced in their line work, and to respond to calls upon made by civil society for the decriminalization of sex work, because sex work is also work. Criminalization of sex work enable widespread abuse, especially by the police. It also exacerbates the stigma associated with sex work, but also prevented access to fundamental rights. For example, it is critically important that sex workers have access to health care facilities in order to stop the spread of sexual transmitted diseases such as HIV and AIDS. There is also a need for government to consider well-crafted programs for when sex workers existed their profession. Therefore, we welcome the decision by Department of Social and Constitutional Development to hold consultative meetings of the issue of criminalization of sex workers. Honorable Chairperson and members, there can be no doubt that women's movement have come a long way since the Women's Charter of 1954 and 1994. Significant milestones have been achieved since 1994, such as ensuring that participation of women in the political and legislative authorities, who have been able to open up opportunities in education, skilling sectors for women. We have ensured that we create a social security net with intervention that prioritize women. However, despite our impressive record, the legacy of apartheid colonialism continues to haunt us, and the condition of women as those who constitute the majority of the population continue to be nervous. According to the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report, South Africa ranks 14th in political empowerment, 10th in the percentage of women in parliament, and 12th in the percentage of women in ministerial positions. However, it ranks 92nd in economic participation and opportunity, and 131st for wage equality for similar work, where the gender gap is still 49.6%. This shows highly the agency of the program for racial, social, economic transformation. In the structures, Honorable Chairperson, as we conclude, we would like to point out that the Women's Charter 2021 calls upon us to make a paradigm shift in our approach in order to effect the changes that we have. So since the promise of 1994, we must ensure that, amongst other things, gender-sensitive amendment in policy design, gender budgeting, and the mainstreaming in gender perspective find expression in the implementation of programs. This will ensure that the developmental state, which must mobilize market and non-market stakeholders towards a developmental agenda, prioritize women and the gender question as it resolves the triple challenges of poverty, unemployment, and equality. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Maleka, for taking part in the discussion as per delegated. And I call upon Honorable Gwanem Mashabane, the Minister in the Presidency for Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities, to take part in the debate. Over to you, Minister. Am I audible, Minister?
I don't see her on the platform.
Okay. In that situation, can we then proceed and invite Honorable MEC Rakwali, MEC for Social Development of Limpopo? Over to you, Minister, if you are ready to take part.
You called on MEC Rakwali.
Yes.
And I heard the minister in the process. That's why I'm a bit confused.
Is the minister around on the platform?
It's MEC Rakwali that is responding. She's there.
Okay. MEC Rakwali, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Program Director. Greetings to the Deputy Chairperson of the NCOP, Ma'am Sylvia Lucas, and honorable members. Good afternoon. It is my pleasure to be part of this today's National Council of Provinces debate on the 21st Women's Charter for Accelerated Development. This debate comes a day after the celebration of International Women's Day, which was held in Limpopo, led by Minister for Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities, Maitongwana Mashabane. It is important that during times like this, we celebrate all the positive strides that have been made in the development and empowerment of women. The celebration presented an opportunity for all of us to pause and reflect on the significant strides that have been made by the ANC-led government in ensuring that the rise of women, economic empowerment, and gender parity are realized in the democratic dispensation. I must say without fear of contradiction that the democratic government has done a lot in ensuring that there is not only constant but consistent growth in funding for the rise of our women, children, and people living with disabilities across the board. Statistics suggest that at the provincial level, women's representative has increased from 30% to 43% after the 29th national elections. The Limpopo province has the largest proportion of women, with 53% of seats in the legislature occupied by women, surpassing the South African Development Community's parity target. Additionally, women constitute 43% of the cabinet and 40% of councillors in local government. However, the generation of today must ensure that the dreams of our earlier generations, women such as Umama Charlotte Manya Mateke, Lillian Ngoyi, Sarah De Bruyn, Albertina Sisulu, Adelaide Tambo, Winnie Madikizela Mandela, and many more are realized. Government and the private sector must redouble its efforts in ensuring that the total women emancipation is achieved in our lifetime. Our forebearers worked tirelessly to see to it that our people are serviced irrespective of race, culture, and gender. Their every action was aimed at achieving liberation and equality in society and creating platforms for advancing women's rights. As the situation stands, the majority of South Africans, especially those in the rural provinces such as Limpopo, are largely dependent on government social grants, which are mainly within the Department of Social Development. These grants are in fact the main source of income for about 18 million citizens across the country. In Limpopo, half of the population's households depend on the provision of these grants. Honorable members, further, the South African government extended the 350 SRD grants to further assist our people who are in dire situations. We must all take comfort to the fact that government is doing its best ensuring that our citizens, our people are kept afloat, and it continues to create an enabling environment for the private sector to invest and create employment opportunities. Guided by this reality, we are indeed delighted that the sixth administration, as led by President Cyril Ramaphosa, is determined to ensure that no South African, especially the vulnerable groups of our society, go to bed on an empty stomach. Honorable Chairperson, we must also use the day to confront some of these issues that are still hampering the empowerment and development of our women. In Limpopo, like in some parts of the country, we still experience social ills such as gender-based violence, teenage pregnancy, school bullying, substance abuse, and general violence meted out against the vulnerable groups of our society. We can never fully celebrate this day while we are still experiencing some of these challenges mentioned above in our communities. Gender-based violence and femicide and other social ills remain stumbling blocks of the progress we should be making towards the complete liberation of women. In his State of the Province address delivered a few weeks ago, the Limpopo Premier Chubusten Tabata spoke sharply against this phenomenon. He said, as I quote, "Our particular attention is focused on gender-based violence, which has reached unprecedented levels of brutality and barbarism. Perpetrators of this violence are becoming more vicious with each day that passes." Close quote. We have seen women being killed in their homes, women are killed on the street, women are victimized at workplaces, and women are still being killed while in possession of a protection order against their abusive partners. We simply cannot afford to fold our arms and watch while the women of our country become endangered species. Faced by the reality, the Limpopo provincial government established a technical committee on gender-based violence in order to bolster accountability, coordination, and leadership in the fight against scourge of gender-based violence and femicide. A step in the right direction, but we cannot fight this war alone. I'm inviting all sectors of our society, from the religious community, traditional leadership, NGOs, political parties, and everyone, to join hands with government in confronting this vicious monster called gender-based violence and femicide. This is a fight we all cannot afford to lose. This is a monster that affects all of us and is fast becoming a pandemic on its own proportion. There is also a strong relationship between violence and substance abuse. The fight against the abuse of alcohol and drugs is also a fight for peaceful and orderly society. It is my strong conviction that gender-based violence will also end when each one of us takes responsibility for the happenings in their own homes, in their backyards, communities, in their workplaces, in their places of worship, and in the schools. Honorable members, I must indicate that for as long as women remain burdened by the social conditioning towards sexual vulnerability, as long as women shoulder the greatest burden of poverty, for as long as they form the largest part of those unemployed in our society, for as long as they are paid less than their male counterparts, for as long as they struggle to start businesses, for as long as they face discrimination in the workplace, for as long as women confront these and other countless challenges, our vision of equal and just society will remain elusive. We must, all of us, be directed by Women's Charter, which was adopted in 1954 to set the tone for today's democratic order. The Charter was reviewed in 1994 under the Women's National Coalition, which adopted the Women's Charter. For effective Women's Charter review process was taken during the Women's Parliament held in August 2019 to cover all the 9 provinces. In 2020, the Limpopo government managed to convene the district review sessions to take stock on the progress made in implementing the articles of Women's Charter since the advent of freedom and democracy. The review process was conducted in all the 5 districts of the province. This was a multi-stakeholder initiative with a sole purpose of advancing women's economic empowerment and inclusion. Since the dawn of democracy, work has been done to transform our society, to bridge the material divides between black and white, between men and women, between boys and girls, between urban and rural. We have made significant progress in several areas, not least in the provision of healthcare, education, and essential services and infrastructure to the poor. But we have not fundamentally transformed patterns of ownership, control, and benefit in our economy. The empowerment of women is not negotiable and is therefore an integral part of our effort to achieve inclusive growth, create jobs, and expand economic opportunities for all. It is a task that requires a dedicated and unrelenting attention. There is another reason why this 2021 Women's Charter for Accelerated Development Initiative is so vitally important. The economic empowerment of women is one of the pillars of our National Strategic Plan of Gender-Based Violence and Femicide. As I have already alluded to, by providing the economic circumstances of women, we are reducing their vulnerability to abuse and violence. By being less economically dependent on male partners, women have a
As the
better
MEC move towards closure.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. A word of warning, all seated here, COVID-19 arrived on our shores, and as a country, we did what we needed to do to save lives. There have been consequences that have been followed as an aftermath, and we are all alive to the reality. It is now more crucial than ever to ensure that all our collective efforts in empowering women of our society do not begin to degenerate. I want to leave you with encouraging words of President Ramaphosa. When he was delivering the State of the Nation address last month, he said, as I quote, "Time and time again, we all pulled ourselves back from the brink of despair and inspired hope, renewal, and progress. Now we must do so again. Let us forge a new consensus to confront a new reality, a consensus that unites us behind our shared determination to reform our economy and rebuild our situations," close quote. As we are regrouping to build our economy again, we will make sure that all people, irrespective of gender, are empowered fully and equally. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable MEC Rakwale. Let us again express our gratitude for your participation in the debate on International Women's Day. We will now invite Honorable Minister Ngwana Mashabane, the Minister in the Presidency for Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities. Over to you, Minister. I get a sense that the Minister is muted.
The Minister is unmuted now, Chair. Good evening. I thank you again for this opportunity to participate in this very important Women's Charter Review for Accelerated Development, which is taking place a day after the commemoration of the International Women's Day. I must say that we had a very good interaction yesterday with MEC Rakwale and more than 100 women farmers as we are preparing for the CSW 66. CSW 66 this year will be different because we have been given the honor to be, as a country, the chair of the session, whose theme is achieving gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls in the context of climate change, environmental and disaster risk reduction policies and programs, which will be under the chairship of South Africa, as I said. CSW is an important organ of the UN that must be utilized to maximize the advancement of gender equality and empowerment of women. The timing of the chairing of the commission is also critical. In preparation for South Africa's participation in the 66th session, the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, together with the Department of Forestry and Fisheries, and the environment, as well as agriculture, land reform, and rural development, have been coordinating sessions on the priority theme with the different stakeholders, including women farmers, to hear how climate change has affected them. We seek to carry to New York a South African position that reflects on the collective strength of women in driving gender equality through key reforms. We have concluded 2 of the 3 ongoing consultations planned at the national level to consolidate a national position. As I said yesterday, we spent time in Limpopo. We will be in Northwest. Our DG is in Northern Cape. We will continue doing that. What is emerging, or what emerged even yesterday, I'm sure MEC Rahwale had spoken to this, are the persisting challenges that continues to impede women's advancement in these male-dominated fields, especially in the issue of water licenses that affect them negatively, because you cannot be a farmer and not have water for your crops and animals. Furthermore, South Africa is one of the 12 countries selected by the UN Women to present its country review on the economic empowerment of women in the changing world of work. Honorable members and chair, ANC-led government inherited in 1994 a country built on the systematic exclusion of women. The South African economy had been shaped by a century of patriarchal, segregationist, and exclusionary policies that marginalized most of the women from meaningful economic participation. A major legacy of apartheid has been the feminization of poverty and gendered inequalities that continue to impact on the lives of many South African women today. The road to strengthening our democracy must be anchored in actions outlined in the Generation Equality Forum that seeks to accelerate the implementation of the Beijing Platform for Action, which is the instrument developed by women from all walks of lives, as being monitored by UN Women and reported and discussed by member states annually at the CSW. South Africa has a long history of women's collective struggle waged against intersecting struggles. It is through these bold revolutionary efforts of great women that we enjoy the rights and freedoms of which we are enjoying today. It's because of the actions our forebearers took, like Charlotte Manye Makeke. The formation of the Women's National Coalition in 1992 was critical in ensuring that the democratic transition of South Africa envisions freedom of all people, particularly minority groups, including women, children, persons with disabilities, LGBTQIA, and other persons. The Charter campaign became the vehicle to which to drive narrative of inclusive development of all South Africans. Through the Charter campaign, the Women's National Coalition drafted and presented a Women's Charter for effective equality to CODESA for inclusion in the Bill of Rights. This charter was adopted in 1994 and served as the basis on which gender agenda was promised. Honorable Chairperson, the period since 1994 has been characterized by government efforts to effect political, economic, and social transformation. In addition, our government has sought to overcome barriers to gender equality and women's empowerment with a very clear intent to transform historical gender imbalances. Chapter 1 and 2 of the Constitution provides an enabling framework that guides the introduction of policies and laws to enforce transformation, non-discrimination, non-sexism, and equality for women and their equal representation and full participation in national government structures, decision-making, and leadership positions. Chair and honorable members, economic transformation and empowerment of women is part of mandate we established in 1994. While many strides have been made, more still need to be done. We need to remove the barriers put by patriarchy and its enablers, and to ensure that women participate effectively in the mainstream of the economy. Government has introduced a range of policies and programs designed to facilitate women's economic empowerment, to provide business resources, information, and opportunities for South African women entrepreneurs. However, there has been limited success. Women's unequal share of unpaid care and domestic work is an important barrier to economic empowerment and well-being, and this reflects the time-intensive nature of some of these tasks performed around the home, such as caring for other household members. While there is still a long way to go, women have started to break through the glass ceilings. In the corporate world, this, especially in previously male-dominated fields such as manufacturing, finance, big business, science, engineering, mathematics, technology, ICT, related fields, mining and construction, just to count but a few. Overall, women have made significant strides in ensuring that they are better represented and have a voice in parliament, judiciary, in the cabinet, and in public service, in the corporate world, and in the society at large. Chair and ladies and gentlemen, it is important to reflect on the key gender priorities on how to overcome persisting challenges as we move towards the target dates of the UN Agenda 2030, the National Development Plan Vision 2030, as well as towards the AU Agenda 2063. I wish to thank Honorable Sylvia Lucas and her esteemed team, the honorable members of the National Council of Provinces, leading a review of women's charters across 9 provinces, 44 districts, 8 metropolitan municipalities from 2019 to 2020. It is out of this extensive review that the Women's Charter for Accelerated Development 2021 emerged. It is truly a demand document for the women of South Africa. Honorable Chair, in 1995, the country adopted the Beijing Platform for Action. The core principle underpinning the implementation of this instrument advance women and girls and achieve gender equality in this approach and gender mainstreaming. Gender mainstreaming demonstrates the need for significant shift in focus and approach to the budgetary process as an important policy framework, administrative tool, and government ethics. Since democracy, South Africa has initiated a number of gender-responsive budget initiatives and is seen as leading both in the continent and globally. Yet women remain economically and socially impoverished. As the members are aware, the Cabinet approved the Gender Responsive Planning, Budgeting, Monitoring, Evaluation, Auditing Framework in 2019. This framework is being implemented across the government, and gender responsive budgeting is an important component of the framework and aims to bring gender mainstreaming to public finance, which ultimately results in gender responsive budgets. Gender responsive budgets are not separate budgets for women, but are general budgets that are planned, approved, executed, monitored, and audited in a gender responsive way. In February this year, the department, with support of the European Union, hosted a policy dialogue on gender responsive budgeting to improve the understanding of the implementation of the GRP. I'm proud and honored to announce that this dialogue was attended virtually by over 700 participants from all over the world who wanted to get to hear what South Africa is doing. This shows the critical nature of the process. At the heart of the gender budgeting is a response to the needs of the recipients of public services, measuring the degree to which public services provided for by public finances meet the needs of men and women, boys and girls, for whom they were designed, is the first step towards making budgets that are gender sensitive.
As the minister moved towards closure.
Yes. Clear target setting per industrial sectoral master plan and economic empowerment is what we should all gear up for and continue working together, even including running workshops where it is necessary for us to know what to ask for, but above all, work together with all the society, but in particular, government. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, for taking part in the debate on the 2021 Women's Charter for Accelerated Development. We will now invite MEC Shiba from Mpumalanga province to also take part in the debate. Over to you, MEC.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson. I hope I'm audible. I'm affected by the load shedding now as I speak. Honorable Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Honorable Deputy Chairperson of the NCOP, House Chairperson, Honorable Members of the House, Honorable Chief Whip of the NCOP, Permanent and Special Delegates of the NCOP, Ministers and Deputy Ministers present, my colleagues, MECs present, good afternoon. Chairperson, the Women's Charter gives expression to the diverse experiences, visions, and aspirations of South African women. The Women's Charter Accelerated Development, drafted in 2021, demonstrated that when women are united for a common cause, they are able to achieve more. Honorable Chairperson, we all know that the 1954 Women's Charter was adopted at the founding conference of the Federation of South African Women in Johannesburg on the 17th of April, 1954. Some of the giants on whose shoulders the Women's Charter stand are veteran activists such as Helen Joseph, Lillian Ngoyi, Florence Mkhize, Ray Alexander, Dora Tamana, and many who dared the brutal regime and fought for women's rights. At the time the Charter expressed the philosophy and aims of the then newly established Federation of South African Women, FEDSO. These include the right to vote and to be elected to all state bodies without restriction or discrimination, the right to full opportunities for employment with equal pay and responsibilities of promotion in all spheres of work, equal right with men in relation to property, marriage, and children, and for the removal of all laws and customs that deny women such equal rights, for the development of every child through free compulsory education for all, for the protection of mother and child through maternity homes, welfare clinics, creches, and nursery schools in countryside and towns, through proper homes for all, and through the provision of water, light, transport, sanitation, and other amenities of modern civilization, for the removal of all laws that restrict free movement, that prevent or hinder the right of free association and activity in democratic organization, and the right to participate in the work of these organizations, to build and strengthen women's section in the national liberatory movement and organization of women in trade unions and through the People's Varied Organization, to cooperate with all other organizations that have similar aims in South Africa as well as throughout the world, to strive for permanent peace throughout the world. Honorable Chairperson and members, the real essence of the Charter is well captured on its preamble, which reads as follows, I quote, "We, the women of South Africa, wives and mothers, working women and housewives, African, Indian, European, and colored, hereby declared our aim of striving for the removal of all laws, regulations, conventions, and customs that discriminate against us as women and that deprive us in any way of our inherent right to the advantages, responsibilities, and opportunities that society offers to any one section of the population," close quote. Through this charter, women pledge themselves to keep high the banner of equality, fraternity, and liberty. They took the challenge and burden of removing from our society all the social differences developed in past times between men and women that entrenches the effect of keeping women's gender in a position of inferiority and subordination. They resolved to struggle for the removal of laws and customs that deny African women the right to own, inherit, or alienate property. They resolved to work for a change in the laws of marriage, which have the effect of placing wives in the position of legal subjection to husband and giving husbands the power to dispose of wives' property and earnings and dictate to them in all matters affecting them and their children. Honorable Chairperson, a lot of ground has been covered since the adoption of the initial Women's Charter, and a number of groundbreaking legislation have been passed and are today the cornerstone of the women emancipation. One of those is the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, Act number 108 of 1996, Chapter 2, the Equality Clause that lays the foundation for protecting women's rights. The Equality Clause provides the legal framework within which gender equality is protected and forbids discrimination against anyone on the grounds of race, gender, sex, pregnancy, marital status, sexual orientation, and ethnic or social origin. Honorable Chairperson and members, the triple challenges of poverty, inequality, and unemployment, including the pervasive levels of gender-based violence and femicide, represent the amalgamated and most persistent challenges faced by women. The depth of this challenge is well captured by the former Malawi president and the author of the book, From Day One, Joyce Banda, when she said, I quote, "Discrimination and social norms that penalize girls and women do not start at the adolescence. And by the time girls turn 10, it is often too late to undo the damage that has already been done, close quote. The feminization of poverty is significant because poverty is experienced differently by women as compared to men, more so due to the economic, political, and social dynamics prevalent in the country, which is the most unequal in the world, and incomes are highly polarized. Overcoming
As you wrap up, MEC.
Okay, Chairperson, thank you very much, Chairperson. Overcoming this deeply entrenched and cyclical nature of general poverty, unemployment, and underdevelopment, particularly as disproportionately experienced by women, will require concerted and sustained efforts from the sectors of the society. In conclusion, let me highlight a bit that women in Mpumalanga have proven that when women are given an opportunity to access land, they make good of that land. Women in Mpumalanga contested in the forestry, livestock, agro-processing, and crop production in the adult, youth, and persons with disability categories in the DART Female Entrepreneurs Awards and achieved up to the overall national prizes. This shows that despite the limitation posed of women, when they find an opportunity, they display their resilience. Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson, for an opportunity.
Thank you, Honorable MEC Shiba from the province of Mpumalanga. I want to invite Honorable Modise, but I see she's in and out of the platform, unless probably she has two gadgets. Honorable Modise.
Chairman.
Chairman.
Okay, hey, network. Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson, honorable members, my colleagues. Let me start with a quotation from Nelson Mandela. Freedom cannot be achieved unless women have been emancipated from all kinds of oppression, close quote. Honorable member, we can never fully enjoy Am I protected?
Honorable MEC Fanta, can you move, please? You are protected, Honorable Modise. You can continue.
Honorable members, we can never fully enjoy the fruits of our democracy without the emancipation of women. We have identified gender-based violence and femicide as a sorry. Nikita received two gadgets because of the problem of a network. We have identified gender-based violence as femicide as an endemic in our country. It is not only impede in the development of women, but also of our country. Economically, statistics have indicated that South Africa is the most dangerous country for a woman to live. It is said that only 25% of women in our country feel safe when working alone at night. We must change this reality for our women. We must continue to effort to build a safe society for women and children. In fact, for everyone in our country to feel safe. It cannot be that year by year the figures of the number of women killed or violated increase. The the violence aimed at women is deeply embedded in patriarchy, and the high level of inequality is in our society. Women's Charter explained that the close quote, let me quote, domestic violence in South Africa is a consequence of the complex interplay of patriarchy, culture, and the negative masculine construct, close quote. The patriarchal culture beliefs still prevail today. Emphasis, male ascertainance, and domain of women influence the construction of masculinity and reinforce domestic violence. Noting and understanding the roots of the challenge that we are faced with today of gender-based violence and femicide. The National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide address issue of toxic masculinity to further drive our agenda of social cohesion. The NSP makes provision for addressing this issue through the Pillar 2 of Prevention, Rebuilding of Social Cohesion. In doing so, we try to shift away from toxic masculinity towards embracing positive alternative approach to explain masculinity and other sexual and gender identity. Acknowledging that violence is deeply entrenched in the social, cultural fiber and families, communities, and extended to their broader society. It is therefore become imperative to involve community and families if we are truly engaged to solve the challenge that we are faced. After all gender-based violence is not a government problem. It is a societal problem that requires a multi-phased approach if we are to deal with it. In the first year of the implementation of the NSP, we have continued to address a number of initiatives to address harmful society norms. Respective government departments, civil organization, by labor movement, faith-based organization, and private sector. These sector compared to importance of stopping gender-based violence before even happen. The Department of Social Development has bolstered prevention of efforts amongst community in partnership with the civil organization. We have also integrated programming intervention with the department to address the source of gender-based violence and femicide more strategically to widen deeply impact. As government, we are also increased capacity to public sector through the National School of Governing among public servants to identify and respond to gender-based violence through a 5-day gender course and each course of championing anti-discrimination in the public service. We also working together the Department of Education sector by building capacity of educators and school management to facilitate inclusive teaching and learning. If we are to address gender-based violence, we are also to be aware in the manner that our children, girls and boys, we must utilize mechanisms appealing to children to address the matter of violence. The Department of Basic Education is a key department with prevention and has undertaken a range of important interventions, including the use of sports and play to address social ills, particularly those that are contributing factors to the gender-based violence, such as bullying, substance abuse, human trafficking, and sexual abuse, even amongst themselves. These measures are also in the forms of running webinars and webinars to locate GBVF prevention as part of the wider social cohesion prevention and national building agenda, and through intervention to facilitate gender responsiveness at the level of education, textbook, and tools. There has been vast progress that has been made in the implementation of the NSP on GBF. As government, our primary priority is to institutionalize the NSP on GBV across government, and it has been our key focus in order to build a stable foundation for effective implementation of the plan. We know the challenge along the way. However, as government, through the Department of Women, Youth, and Persons with Disability, we continue to play a catalyst and oversight role in our effective coordination and institutionalization of the NSP. The process of rolling out the NSP took place in various provinces, and the following success were recorded. The NSP GBV is aligned to existing the structure to fasten the process of the implementation of the plan. Continuing with the spirit of the multi-sectoral approach, there is a visible progress in the provinces where civil organization is actively involved in the provincial structure, and most provinces and monitoring and evaluation plans are in place, Honorable Chair. Progress has been made to address the systematical challenge that resulted in the adequate response to the management of GBV cases and the facilitation to access the justice, safety, and protection in response to the needs of GBV. We have amended the legislation in the Chair? Okay. In this the progress that government has done to mitigate the sources of gender-based violence. However, we do acknowledge that much still needs to be done. We have improved the state of our shelter in also to cater persons belong to LGBT community in our provinces where gender-based violence require all of us to be active and confront toxic behavior when confronted by them. It is up to all of us to work together towards goal of NDP, when women and children feel safe and secure. South Africa, let us change the narrative that we are the most dangerous country for women live. Our constitution is to be the most progressive in the world and promoted the acknowledgement rights for everyone, promoting tolerance in our country. In my conclusion, Chairperson, let us make the country safe for future generation and stop pointing fingers, but instead solve the problem that affect and impact all of us, despite the race or classes. As I'm opening quote, the freedom cannot be achieved unless women have been emancipated from all kinds of oppression, close quote, from Nelson Mandela. As I concluded, Honorable Member, I have leave you with this quote from former statesman: if you want to change the world, help the women, close quote. I thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Modise, for taking part in the debate with the theme setting a 25-year vision and agenda to advance women's equality, growth and development. As I invite Honorable Detroit.
Dankie, agbare voorsitter. Ek is trots op die vroue wat ten spyte van die uitsluitende wetgewing, ankers vir 'n nasie, opvoeding vir 'n volk en 'n voorbeeld vir die wêreld, liefde vir die huis is. The adoption of the first Women's Charter on 17 April 1954 during the founding conference of the Federation of South African Women called for the empowerment of men and women of all races for equal opportunities in employment, equal pay for equal work, equal rights in relation to property rights, marriage and children, and the removal of all laws and customs that denied women such equality, close quote. Did this happen, Chair? Or what happened instead? The Department of Environmental Affairs has implemented the Gender Action Plan that gives preference to the appointment of Black women to achieve its gender empowerment and equality mandate. In other words, not all women benefit from this. Hierdie wetgewing gee nie voorkeur aan alle vroue nie, maar aan swart vroue. The following legislation, acts and empowerment models are some of the measures that was put in place to ensure advancement of some, not on the basis of merit, but gender, resulting in women benefiting from these initiatives to be reduced to mere quotas. Legislation like the Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment, Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act, the National Environmental Management Act, the South African Network for Women in Transport, National Housing Act, Social Housing Act, and even Salga's Women's Commission introduced the 50-50 approach where 50% of the people elected in leadership position must be women. And it has been argued in some circles that some of the women in government structures that are in leadership positions are frowned upon. Why could this be? Because it's uncertain if they are there on merit or gender. Vroue word deur hierdie wetgewing bemagtig op die basis van hul geslag en nie op meriete nie. Dis word baie van hierdie vroue gereduseer tot quotas wat voordeel uit die wetgewing en voorskrifte ontvang het, voorsitter. Chair, it's privilege and honor to acknowledge women that has achieved success in spite of all the current social, economic and domestic challenges. Die VF+ glo in gelyke geleenthede, gelyke regte vir vroue en ons haal ons hoed af vir elke vrou wat in strukture sukses op meriete behaal. Julle verdien dit. Baie huishoudings is ook deur wetgewing soos regstellende aksie benadeel. Vele vroue wat deur wetgewing gedwing is om alleen broodwinner in die huis te wees, ma en mentor te wees en steeds 'n ondersteunende vrou tot 'n bekwame werklose man te wees, nie omdat hy onwillig is om te werk nie, maar omdat wetgewing hom verhoed om sy volwaardige rol in die huishouding en samelewing te vertolk en as hulp tot sy vrou op te tree. Ek bedank vandag vroue wat nie moed opgee, ten spyte van onregverdige wetgewing wat haar daarvan ontneem om haar passie op welke wyse uit te leef. Dankie aan elke vrou wat boerderye deur droogtes gebid het, wat stikkende gesinne met geloof in God na plaasaanvalle bystaan. Vroue wat raap en skraap om hongermonde te voed, kinders se dors na kennis te les en steeds tyd te maak om 'n deernis, 'n skurwe moe hand 'n drukkie te gee na 'n moeilike dag. Wat deur jul optrede bewys dat vroue nie spesiale voorkeur nodig het om sukses te behaal nie. Julle is in staat en julle is spesiaal. Dankie aan die vrou wat haarself nie beperk en haarself as die gesig van armoede in Suid-Afrika sien nie. Julle is die morele kompas in baie se lewens. Hierdie is vroue wat bewys het dat geen bevoordelende wetgewing die bepalende faktor was om hul as leiers en suksesvolle individue bo die res te laat uitstyg nie. 'n Wilsbesluit, deursettingsvermoë, inisiatief, kreatiewe denke, onuitblusbare passie vir sukses en oorlewing, vroue van formaat. Great respect to the modern female giants that achieved great success without allowing to be labeled. Melanie Jacobs, motivational speaker and life coach. Entrepreneurs like Michelle Brits, Elizabeth van der Bijl, Alta du Plessis, all women of stature. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Dwight, for taking part in the debate. As I invite Honorable House Chair Nyambi to take charge as my acting ends here. Thank you, Honorable Nyambi.
Thank you, Honorable Miamang. Honorable Khai, the next speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chairperson, Honorable Chairperson of the NCOP, Honorable Deputy Chairperson of the NCOP, Honorable Chief Whip, Ministers and Deputy Ministers, Honorable MECs, Honorable fellow delegates and special delegates. I am honored to participate in this debate, and my focus will be on recognizing women as a motive force of change in Africa, struggles of women and girls, and how South Africa has contributed to these struggles globally. Understanding women's organizational leadership in Africa is complicated. Firstly, because of a lack of data, and secondly, due to constraint within organizational environments. What we do know, though, is that organizational culture does perpetuate stereotypes and biases about what women can do, sculpting women leadership and roles to fit predefined norms. The ever-evolving human desire drives the development of men and women alike. Over the past 60 years, we have witnessed a conspicuous change in women's consciousness in Africa. Many more women wish to be less and less involved in household management and childcare, and are increasingly expanding their involvement in other areas of society. However, there are always challenges, particularly in business. Women in business in all around the world face barriers, and Africa is no exception. In Africa, there are more women in CEO and board roles than the global average, according to McKinsey 2016 report of Women Matter Africa. Still, there are too few women in leadership positions in our country and in our continent. Almost 3 decades ago, African women had reason to expect a change following a much heralded global conference that set ambitious targets to transform the lives of women across the world. This year marks the 27th anniversary of that milestone event, the 4th World Conference on Women, held in Beijing, China in 1995. Like their counterparts elsewhere, African women are taking stock of progress and are asking what extent the promised reforms have been implemented. They are also examining why progress has been limited in many countries and are seeking ways to overcome the obstacles. During the last 30 years, there has been a number of signs of improvement. There have been moves to implement the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, a UN protocol, as well as development of new policies and guidelines and creation of networks of gender experts. Honorable members, poverty has a woman's face. For many African women, the Beijing Bloc platform and the various international instruments our government have signed have yet to translate into positive changes in their daily lives. They remain at the bottom of their social hierarchy with poor access to land, credit, health, and education. While some agreements that African governments have ratified enshrine property and inheritance rights, in most countries, women are denied those very rights. Compounding the situation are setbacks such as the HIV/AIDS pandemic that is destroying the health and more women than men in Africa, eroding some of the development gains women have attained. As a result, poverty in Africa continues to wear a woman's face. The finding of Zimbabwe-based non-governmental organization, which is called Women in Law and Development in Africa, were distressing. They found that 20 years after Beijing, African women were much poorer. But perhaps the most inhibiting factor of women's development is that women in Africa and in parts of our own country continue to be denied an education, often the only ticket out of poverty. Disparities between girls and boys start in primary school, and the differences widen up through the entire educational system. The positive news, though, is that in total enrollment in primary education, Africa registered the highest relative increase during the last 2 decades. Many women acknowledge that to enable women to escape poverty, development policies should place more emphasis on their contribution to the economy. Even though women make up a significant proportion of the economically active population, their contribution is not fully recorded because they are mainly engaged in family farming or informal sector. In other cases, what they do, such as household work, is not considered an economic activity. In agriculture, sub-Saharan Africa's most vital economic sector, women contribute 60 to 80% of labor in food production for both household consumption and for sale. When we consider the phenomenon of climate change, we believe that it affects everyone, but it is the world's poorest and those in vulnerable situations, especially women and girls, who bear the brunt of environmental, economic, and social shocks. The same women and the girls are also early adapters of new agricultural techniques, first responded when disaster strikes, and important decision makers at home about the energy and waste. We argue that climate action cannot be successful or sustainable if it does not involve women. The UN Secretary General, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, has singled out women's leadership for their unique ability as drivers of solutions when they are empowered. UN analysis has shown that men and women have different coping mechanisms and vulnerabilities in the face of climate change. It is not surprising then that gender dynamics are a factor in the consideration in designing and implementing strategies for adaptive approaches to climate change. Patriarchal practices remain one of the biggest stumbling blocks to progress in South Africa and the continent. Gender stereotypes can be a result of gender socialization. Girls and boys are expected to act in certain ways, and these ways are socialized from birth by many parents in society. For example, in many households, girls are still expected to be clean and quiet, while boys are messy and loud. As children get older, gender stereotypes become more apparent in styles of dress and choice of leisure activities. Boys and girls who do not conform to gender stereotypes are usually ostracized by same age peers for being different. This can lead to negative effects such as lower self-esteem, substance abuse, suicide, and other antisocial behaviors. For instance, boys are more active, physical, and play in larger spaces than girls. In contrast, girls are more compliant, pro-social, and play closer to adults than boys. One important way in which children learn about gender roles and develop gender type behavior and attitude is through their interaction with peers. Honorable members, women are mostly poorly represented at the highest level in management and leadership in both government and the private sector. A 2017 South Africa survey found that while 20.7% of directors and 29.4% of executive managers were women, women accounted only for 11.8% of CEOs and chairpersons. Women have traditionally faced the lack
As you conclude, Honorable Khai.
Okay, Chair. Despite the challenges, more and more women are paving the ways for young girls to become leaders in their own communities. We hear every day of the accomplishment of South African women, from the everyday lifelong work of women against pandemic to the elevation of others to position of influence and responsibilities. At this momentous time in the history of global trading system, we celebrate one of our own, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, former Nigerian finance minister, former Managing Director of World Bank Group, and non-resident Distinguished Fellow with Brookings Africa Growth Initiative, who became the first woman ever, first African to head the World Trade Organization. Thank you so much, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Khai. I'll now invite Honorable Bungane. Honorable Khatebe.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable Chair, Deputy Chair, Chief Whip of the NCOP, Provincial Whips, and colleagues. Honorable Chairperson, as we are nearing the end of the fourth wave of the pandemic, we must take stock of the fact that the social and economic consequences of COVID-19 undeniably had a much greater impact on the women of our country. According to Statistics South Africa, the rate of unemployment among women was recorded at 36.8% for the second quarter of 2021, compared to 32.4% amongst men. This reality, coupled with the reality of climate change and the devastating consequences thereof on our natural resources, place an additional burden on women. Women, according to the United Nations, are much more vulnerable as they are more dependent on natural resources and constitute the majority of the world's poor. This is even more true for women in rural areas, whose livelihood depends on the sustainability of natural resources and access to land. As we celebrated International Women's Day on March 8, under the theme Gender Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow, we must recognize this harsh reality. We must ask ourselves, what are we doing? And more importantly, what is the government doing to lessen this burden on women? We urgently require the political will to implement policies aimed at empowering and uplifting women, especially in rural communities. We cannot merely continue year on year to discuss the issue of gender equality and how to increase women's access to land, especially in rural areas. We need firm commitments from our government, and more importantly, we require the rollout of these initiatives. We need to see these promises become reality. Policies and programs specifically designed to benefit women mean very little if women are not aware of these programs, and if government fails to meet targets and timeframes provided for in these policies. We therefore must ask ourselves, what is being done to inform women, especially in rural areas, of government initiatives that are aimed at empowering and uplifting women in agricultural sector and in the green economy? How many women in rural areas are actually aware of skills training initiatives launched by government departments? Again, we can continue to talk and publish lengthy discussions papers on the matter. This will all mean very little if we do not analyze the outcome of these initiatives. Let us demand action and implementation. Let us work together to empower and celebrate our women. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Bungane. I'll now invite the Honorable Deputy Minister of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, Honorable Tsabo.
Mhlali ngaphambili kulendlu namhlanje usihlalo kwakunye nosekela sihlalo we-NCOP amalungu ngokuthunyelwa as delegates namalungu asisigxina kwakuyo lendlu ndithatha lithuba ndiliphiwayo okokuba nam ndizihlomlele kulomba mkhulu kangaka namhlanje. Umba ke ojongene nokuba kuyakwenziwa njani kwaye kusenziwa njani ukuphakamisa le commission yokuba mabaqhubeke babheke phambili abantu abangomama ngokukodwa ke amakhosazana aseze ngobuso elizweni ekubeni akulungele ukukhokhela iAfrika nelizwe ngokubanzi. Ndingaqala ke ngokuba ndizibulisele njengoba sendenzile kubo bonke o-MEC abaye bandifaka isikolo namhlanje ngokuthi ndithathe inxaxheba ngokuphulaphula ngokunjalo noominister besikhanyisela ngakumbi izinto ezenziwa kumaphondo ethu. Ndihlabeke kakhulu ke emhlali ngaphambili kuba eneneni ndiyaze ngokubanzi into kokuba ngamakhosikazi aphakamisa kakhulu ekuqinisekiseni ukuba kukho ukutya kweli lizwe. Zichaziwe ke ngabantu ebebezizithethi ngaphambi kwam izinto nenxaxheba kwakunye neenkqubo ezikula maphondo. Ndiyavuya ke ukuba njengoko ilizwi lamakhosikazi oMzantsi Afrika liza kuvakala phakathi kwamazwi aza kuba ephaya eNew York ngokukhokhelwa ke ngumphathiswa wethu nabo bonke abazizithunywa ukuyothi our voice as women in South Africa will be amongst the voices of the women of the world. I'm very proud to say that what I am going to say, the Department of Dalrat has actually done, is already endorsing and agreeing that indeed some work is being done. I can tell that the new land tenure system has allowed women of this country to be allocated 117,000 hectares that is in their own hands today. I also want to highlight the part that says women in rural areas, I'm one of them, have inheritance in one way or another, where households were allocated land as a tradition. It still remains, and those hectares remain in the hands of those homestead. But indeed, I agree with those who actually say not enough funds have been allocated to ensure that that land is put in use. To an extent, it is always referred to as the land that lie fallow. I am also of the view, justifiable so, that it is not the lack of the skills that these women are not successful in production. Rather, is the means of production, where you don't have water, where you don't have required implements, and as time change, the climate changes, and we therefore want to say the department is actually prepared, and our guidance to the all the policies that we have put that have created an ecosystem that is user-friendly to our women, our young people, to engage in agriculture. We are actually on track, and our state plan is very clear on that, and our policies agree that such programs will be accelerated. However, I would want to warn that all the human beings are actually have adapted from where they come from. It is also important to understand the basic principles of adult education, that people, human beings, learn only when education is brought to their doorstep. And secondly, remembering what former President Thabo Mbeki said in one of the manifestos, he actually said, we will place senior skilled professionals amongst our people where they are in order to support them. I would argue that if at some stage we will not be always being in a helicopter type of view, but rather be local, and localization must take place, and therefore there will be change and there will be a bottom-up approach to help our people. Going forward and very fast, I would actually also argue that there is information, there is wealth under those dukes that our women wear. There is a wealth of information that is in those elderly women we see now in queues, waiting for a grant. If only they were empowered, as we all agree, to actually do what they used to do best. Most of us in this house debating today, we only went to school because agricultural products were a support for us to pay for our fees. May we, in our wisdom, actually pay respect to those and actually focus as well on the indigenous information, because it will be helpful. I also would want to say, as long as we run in parallel lines that in science are always referred to as never meet, we will not achieve the goals. The time, Chairperson and honorable members, is now for us to focus on the new way of doing things. That is the district development model, to ensure that we actually come together as a wave and attack the poverty and attack the crimes and attack rape, but let us be visible where our people are. In conclusion, Chair, I would want to say, definitely mention a few things, that gender mainstreaming is an important issue within the climate negotiation space of this climate matter will actually damage South Africa, damage the continent. We need to start now and recognize that why there was a National Environmental Management Act was to enable us, all of us in this house, to preserve the land for the coming generation that is not here. We can't be allowed to ruin this land in a way of saying we are producing. Let us preserve, let us focus on sustainable development by ensuring that we love the land, our mother. And also, we must also not forget that whatever burdens we carry as women, we must ensure that we are in a position to actually look after our families in whatever business and busy we are. But one other thing, we are good homemakers. We are those people who promote peace, understanding, and love in a family life. With that as a team, we will win. I thank you, honorable members, for listening to me and actually for allowing me to participate in this historic debate. After listening to the best debate, Mama Ngowana yesterday, the debate, it was all like we are in the same venue, the way it was warm. I thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable GM. I'll now invite Honorable Baha. Honorable Baha.
Thank you, Chairperson. Honorable Chair, Honorable Minister, Honorable members, and fellow South Africans, good day. The Women's Charter was adopted in 1954, and it played an important role in setting the tone for today's democratic order by providing a foundation to build from. It was when reviewed in 1994 under the Women's National Coalition, which adopted the Women's Charter for Equality. The Women's Charter is a declaration of intent by the Federation of South African Women,
which clearly defines the rights and privileges for women by women in South Africa. Under the Women's Charter, it seeks to advocate that only women are entitled to seek maintenance from their spouse. But it therefore continues, but mainly and most importantly, the right to full opportunities for employment with equal pay and possibilities of promotion in all spheres of work. It also stipulated clearly equal with men in relation to property, marriage, and children, and for the removal of all laws and customs that deny women such equal rights. It therefore continues to unite women against political, social, legal, and economic injustices. It is therefore important to take stock of how far we have come as a nation to measure our success in trying to strike a balance on gender bias in South Africa. It is important to know how far we have come in creating a country that is favorable to South Africans in order to achieve gender parity in South Africa. In the 6th Parliament of South Africa, women's representation in the National Assembly stood at 46%, and in the National Council of Provinces, it is at 36%. This is what we need to build on as a nation. Positive representation for young South African women. See what is achievable. The best we can do is to ensure that we open up our political landscape, to ensure that all our community groups are adequately represented. We must ensure that voices of women and other vulnerable groups are heard, not only identifying who participates in these programs, but that women can actively participate in these programs and can actively shape and influence how these programs are put together to inform the needs and desires of women and other vulnerable groups. It is important to create a gender-sensitive, inclusive economic growth so as to give opportunities to women in South Africa. In that way, we would be able to ensure that labor policies and interventions effectively create opportunities for women participation and equal benefits. Women economic empowerment is central to realizing women's rights and gender equality. That in essence means agency and meaningful participation in economic decision-making at all levels, from the household to international institutions. One of the key challenges that women have to go through is inaccessibility of healthcare services. Women in rural areas have to travel long distances before getting to medical facilities. The government must ensure that healthcare services are accessible to women and with a special consideration of women in rural areas. There have been specific cases when women from rural areas end up giving birth under unbearable conditions. Empowering women in the economy and closing gender gaps in the world of work are key to achieving the 2030 agenda for sustainable development. When women work, economies grow. One key issue that has to be addressed is the fact that women are paid less than men, even when the responsibilities are the same. This, unfortunately, is a global trend that has to be addressed immediately to eradicate this unfair, discriminatory practice. Violence and harassment in the workplace affects women regardless of age, location, income, or social status. It is crucial for women to be protected is to ensure that gender-based violence and sexual harassment does not have space in the workplace and in society as a whole. There must be legal protection of all women against sexual and racial harassment, abuse, and assault. There must be facilities staffed by trained personnel when women can report cases of rape, battery, and sexual assault, undergo medical examination, and receive appropriate treatment, and counseling can be provided. Therefore, all endeavors must be put in place, including legal covers, to protect women in society. It is quite important for men to accept women as equal partners, starting at home, and to teach the young men and boys to treat women correctly. Men must know that they can't liberate themselves from discrimination practice, and prejudice, and yet fail to extend the same to women in law and in practice. We still have cases where adult male teachers find pleasure in impregnating young girls in various schools in South Africa. The Department of Basic Education and the Department of Health must ensure that learners' pregnancy in our schools comes to an end. This happens while adult male teachers only recognize their own children as still young. The National Policy for the Prevention and Management of Learner Pregnancy interventions must be implemented to prevent learner or teenage pregnancy. Women must have equal
As you
political...
conclude, Honorable Baga.
Thank you, Chair. Women must have equal political leadership opportunity and access at all levels of government, the private sector, and civil society organizations. No political position should be based on gender or race. Rural women must be part of decision-making structures in traditional communities. We have seen no wrongdoing when women are in chieftaincy in any community across the country. South Africa has the best constitution in the world. We have the best Chapter 9 institutions compared to many countries around the globe. All we need to do is to ensure that South African citizens benefit from the good that the constitution seeks to achieve. Chairperson, we have a lot of ground to cover for us to be really where we should be. However, we have gone too far to go back. Let's soldier on as we can see the finish line. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Baga. I'll now invite Honorable Gillion.
Honorable Chairperson, the oppression of women has affected their political, social, and economic life. Within the social aspect, various dimensions affect the social position of women and their freedoms. Our society, being largely patriarchal, breed a lot on discrimination and marginalization of women. Culture is one dimension which has had a profound impact on the freedoms of women and the type of reproductive practices they can undertake. Religion is another social institution which also influences how women exercise their reproductive rights. From an economic point of access, reproductive health care varies due to the level of inequality in our society, despite the access provided by our public healthcare system. The inequality in our dual healthcare system has an impact to access. It is for this reason that the National Health Insurance is a necessary policy imperative of the ANC, as it will expand access, and this will contribute in providing healthcare for all women, as public healthcare has other capacity challenges. As Kathy Albertine in a paper on claiming and defending abortion rights in South Africa noted that, interestingly, for women in the exiled African National Congress, the conditions of exile serve to inform them on issues of reproductive choice. At this point, the burdens of motherhood, gender-based violence, and teenage pregnancies, combined with poor health care, unsafe and illegal abortions, fed the increasing belief by the ANC Women's Section that abortion should be legalized in a democratic South Africa, providing a basis for the development of public health and feminist arguments after 1990. South Africa legalized abortion services through the Choice and Termination of Pregnancy Act in 1996. The law is considered one of the most progressive abortion laws globally. Since its inception in 1996, Abortion-related deaths and injuries are estimated to have reduced by over 90%. This is the paradigm shift in reproductive health care in our country. This is an outcome of a protracted process due to the different divergent views of citizens on access to reproductive health care, such as abortion. The abortion law has transferred the freedom of women and their right to take decisions which have to do with their reproductive rights. The most important aspect of the Choice and Termination of Pregnancy Act is the fact that it allows pregnant women to take decisions without the authority of anyone else to terminate a pregnancy. This is to protect reproductive rights of women without being pressured by anyone else, including their partner. The Women's Charter in Article 11 on health clearly outlines that women in particular are unaware of their rights in relation to health services. Health services have not been appropriately oriented to meet women's health needs and priorities. The lack of basic life-sustaining services, such as water and sanitation, has denied the majority of South Africans access to the resources necessary to ensure good health. The Charter calls for equal, affordable, and accessible healthcare services, which meet women's specific health needs, shall be provided. Women have the right to control over their bodies, which includes the right to reproductive decisions. Access to information and knowledge to enable women to make informed choices about their bodies and about health care should be provided. Education about family planning and family planning services should be provided free of charge to both men and women. Appropriate and accessible mental health care services must be provided to women. The Women's Charter and Priority Actions on Social Protection as a mechanism to advance gender equality has prioritized providing access to adequate protections for girls and women of reproductive age, including pregnant women and girls and new mothers. This is a concrete expression of power to the people and ensuring the rights of women is restored. Reproduction rights are human rights. The implementation of the Choice of Termination of Pregnancy Act has also come with challenges. One of the major challenges is around access to reproductive health care, which is timeous and holistic in providing comprehensive support for women. There are a number of factors which impact access, which can be poor services provided by health practitioners, stigmatizing reproductive health care in the community. The privacy and psychosocial support are important, noting the different attitudes and perspectives on abortions, an example, or access to other birth control measures, which are important. In other locations, reproductive services are accessible distant from communities, which has led to an increase of private services in reproductive rights. We are gravely concerned as the African National Congress on illegal providers offering reproductive health care in rural and urban areas. Research has reported that approximately 50% of abortions are occurring outside of designated health facilities. Many women and girls, especially those from poor backgrounds and marginalized communities, still struggle to access safe abortion services due to structural and systemic barriers. In order to address this problem, Chairperson, it is important we increase awareness and information sharing among all women in our country so that they fully understand.
As you conclude, Honorable Gideon.
Thank you, Chairperson. As they fully understand their sexual and reproductive rights and the different services which our government provides. Honorable Chairperson, as I conclude, the ANC with the people of South Africa has laid a basis for the continuation of women's struggles and generations to come will surely live in a better society where women have equal opportunities. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Gideon. I'll now invite Honorable Deputy Chair of the NCOP, Honorable Mama Lucas.
Thank you very much, Honorable Papa Jomo Nyambi, Honorable Chairperson. As the protocol has been established, I want to continue in saying that I would like to express my sincere appreciation to all the members and provinces who participated in this debate. And we could see that members acknowledge that this document, our Women's Charter, as it is reviewed, will serve as one of the key instruments in serving as a guide and a roadmap to accelerate the realization of gender equality. I think there is quite considerable consensus that this will require that we don't continue paying lip service to the issues facing the women of the country. Just like the members, the women of South Africa spoke unanimously that we must employ every instrument available to change the material conditions of women. The women of South Africa see us and Parliament as the champion of their plight. Before I continue, I really want to appreciate the members that have participated in this debate. I would love to, if time allows, just take out one or two issues from what members have said to actually indicate that it is true that our members are taking the issues of gender equality very serious. We are also taking the fact that the Women's Charter is a roadmap and a document that provides for us. We want to congratulate Eastern Cape for the fact that it is indicating that more and more women are being appointed in positions of power, particularly in the administration. And also, there is one issue that was raised by Honorable Christians, is the issue of child marriages. I think in our consultation, and Honorable Christians is one of the members that was quite consistent in attending the consultation processes, will know that the issue of customary law was an issue that was consistently raised, where women in that dispensation are not really necessarily being accommodated in a way that is conducive for themselves. And also the disconnect, that is now the gap between legislation and implementation, is something that was also raised. I think the issues, the particular issue that I am taking from what Honorable Malika was saying, is the issue that the decriminalization of sex work has become a very important issue. And because sex work in South Africa up until today is still not seen as work. So that is one of the issues that I think is very important. And I am raising this issue specifically to show that the Women's Charter, as it is reviewed, should not be a document for our shelves, but it should be a live document. Honorable Rakwale spoke about the issue of the social compact that we should use to unite everyone around a common objective, and that is the objective of achieving gender equality. We particularly want to commend the minister and thank her for the comment, where she is commending us as the NCOP for the work that we have done in ensuring that we review the Women's Charter, but also for her commitment to move with greater speed in changing the plight of the women of our country. We particularly really appreciate the commitment made by the Honorable Minister to ensure that women are given tangible opportunities to participate in the mainstream of our economy. Indeed, women's ability to actively participate in the mainstream economy is indeed a key catalyst for changing the status of women in South Africa. She also outlined very specific and detailed interventions that are geared towards implementing the 2021 Women's Charter for Effective Equality, which symbolizes a firm commitment by our government to give clear expression in the planning, budgeting, and implementation processes, which must give effect and expression to the Charter. We will continue to work together with the Ministry of Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities to ensure that the Charter finds expression across all sectors of our society. But we also want to congratulate South Africa on the chairpersonship of one of the sessions at CSW. It is very important that women of the world should continue to participate in the CSW sessions. That is not as I've seen, there will be virtual or hybrid sessions, but it was very informative and very empowering for us to be able to go to New York to be part of the sessions of the CSW before COVID-19 also put a hamper on that. Honorable High, for a continental perspective on the issues of gender equality and also women empowerment. And we agree that in many African countries, you will find that women is being put in the administration, whilst men are actually occupy the positions that they think is the true positions of power. And if you see the face of poverty on the continent, it still remains a black or a female. It still have a female face, let me put it like that. Honorable Baha, particularly on the issues of education. And I am just taking it from each and every member just to show that we have listened attentively, because we know that each and every one of you, before you came here, you prepared yourself on looking into the issues that was raised within the Women's Charter for accelerated development. I just want to, the Honorable Deputy Minister, particularly on the issues of land and the climate matter, something that is very close to the heart of the current chairperson of that is presiding over the session, the issues of climate change and the climate matter. And I want to thank also Honorable Baha for the fact that you have really encouraged us to soldier on to making sure that we reach a dispensation where women will be equally seen as an equal partner within society in general and broadly. Thank you, Honorable Gillian, also for your very important issue around the issue of reproductive health care, and particularly on the issue of psychosocial support that is so important for particularly women, because two people will actually reproduce, but in the end, it is the woman that must take the responsibility to ensure that it's either abort or bring into life a healthy new member of society. Honorable Chairperson, with that, we want really to express our appreciation to everyone that made this debate possible, but also to our Chief Whip in particular for allowing us to bring this very important document to table it today in this House of NCOP. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Chair. Honorable Delegates, Honorable Delegates, that concludes the business of the day. I wish to thank the Minister, the Deputy Minister, MECs, all special delegates for availing themselves for this very important debate. That concludes the business of the day. The House is officially adjourned.
Thank you, Papa.
Thank you,
Recording stopped.
Yeah, and all the debaters.